So today I'm going to talk about the rewards that you can use using positive reinforcement training. There are quite a few options, and honestly it can make a really big difference to the success of the training. Now, using food in training is really powerful because food's a primary reinforcer. So every living thing is designed to repeat behaviours that earn us food because it helps us all to survive. And food generally elicits a lot of really good emotions as well. I suspect that's why many first dates we go to restaurants, and it's the same for our horses. But as you know, if you're a horse person, then it can also be a bit too much. So horses can get really excited, they can resource guard, they can get grabby. Now, actually mugging is usually, when they push for treats, is usually one of the biggest concerns that people have about using food in training. And that's really more of a training thing than which treat that you use, because that's about teaching the horse that they need to do something else to get the food, not just push for treats. And that's the first thing that we teach. But it is still part of it. We want our horses to be relaxed, yet motivated. So I've got a lot of options here, starting from very low value to high value. And I'm going to talk you through the pros and cons for each one so you can help choose the best one for your horse. Okay, so option number one is hay, just your plain hay that your horse eats all the time. The reason why this is really good is because it's really, really low value. So you get a lot of relaxation from it, especially when you're kind of starting out. Then it can really help horses just to be kind of soft and relaxed about the training and not too intense. Now, if you're coming from other training systems, then sometimes you can't imagine a horse being so excited to get to the arena, doesn't want to leave, wants to keep training. And that joy is wonderful. And it's something that got me really hooked on positive reinforcement training. But what I want to say is that with reward-based training, it's very easy to build the motivation, but we want to do that with a high level of relaxation. So hay is a really, really great place to start. We can build a lot of enthusiasm, interest and motivation in the things that we train, the way that we train and other rewards, but it helps to keep horses really calm. If you have a horse that gets quite tense, just switching to hay, so they get kind of like a bit OTT, a bit over aroused, they can get a bit frustrated in training, then switching to hay can make a really, really big difference very quickly with a lot of horses.
This example shows exactly what I mean. So this is one of my students who's a lovely trainer working with her mare using fairly low value nuts as the reward. Now there's some lovely things going on. The horse is trying really hard, but there's still quite a lot of tension there and she's not quite able to relax. One of the biggest things we changed, and this was just a session or two later, was switching the reward to hay. And you can see immediately that the horse is still connected, but much calmer, softer and more relaxed. Now this is really common, this change depending on the reward that you're using, which is why it's really important to understand the options that you have.
Another benefit of hay is that they really have to chew. So chewing helps horses to soften and relax. Often in positive reinforcement training, especially with other animals, then they use a lot of very small, high value rewards. Like with a dog, you can use tiny bits of sausage and they can get a lot of small rewards quite quickly. And that works because dogs are kind of, they're hunters, scavengers, they kind of search at high energy, but horses are grazers. So everything needs to be kind of calmer. And what happens if we do that is that the brain never really registers a reward. So it's constantly in seeking mode where they're like trying to find the answer. And what needs to happen is that they have the reward, have a bit of chew time, the brain is like, aha, that was the behavior, it settles everything down, and then they search for the next one. And that's how the brain learns. So including a lot of chew time can really, really help. Now with hay, it can be a little bit of a pain to use. You need a bigger treat bag. You can do small sessions and have lots of breaks and go and refill, but you can also just take a pair of scissors and chop it up. It can be a bit of a pain, but actually it can then be really much easier to use in the training session. One thing you can also do to help with the relaxation is have another pile of hay that the horse has free access to. You'd be really surprised. They love the interaction, they love the engagement, they want the connection in the relationship, and your horse will leave the free hay to come and work with you and the hay. And that can really help, especially if you have a horse who gets a bit conflicted, or if they just need a bit of time out sometimes, if you're working on overcoming anxiety, that sort of thing. So hay is always the first place to start. And through all of these, I always recommend starting with the lowest value reward and adding in a little bit of more exciting food as necessary. So treat number one. Okay, so the second one, remember we're starting lowest value, so this is just a small step up from hay, is chaff. Now, I'm not entirely sure what it's called around the world. In the UK, it's chaff. It's basically a kind of chopped hay, chopped straw mix. This, again, super low value, very low sugar. It's just forage based. So especially if you're working with a horse who's prone to weight gain, this can be a really good option, usually suitable for laminitics. Just watch in case it's got molasses or anything else added in. You want to get a really high fiber, plain, low value chaff. It's a little bit easier to use than hay, but it's great for training. Another thing, this still really promotes a lot of chewing, which helps to promote relaxation, and you can feed big handfuls. Feeding slightly less often, but feeding bigger handfuls when you do, I find can often really help. Again, it's that kind of switching the seeking system on and then them having a reward and really having time to chew and recognize that reward. Calm down with the chewing, and also with something big like this, it's quite good if you've got horses that are a little bit clumsy about taking treats. You can also train that, but for them to be more gentle, but especially at the beginning, if they're a bit grabby, a bit lippy, then this can be really helpful to feed nice and easily in nice big handfuls. You can also buy this in bagged feed, so again, nice and cheap. Okay, so number 3, soaked feed. So in here we have a mix of unmolassed soaked sugar beet pulp and lucerne or alfalfa nuts. Again, look for something unmolassed, low sugar, high fiber. You can use beet pulp, lucerne, grass nuts, anything that you can soak up to a feed. Again, this is very cheap to feed as a treat because it's designed as kind of forage-based feed for horses, so you should be able to get this at your feed shop. The benefit of using soaked feed in a training session is one that a little goes a long way, because when you soak it up, obviously it expands a lot, so you're not feeding your horse so much. This can be really beneficial, again, if you're concerned about weight gain. Also, when you're training, especially with dry treats, then your horse can get quite thirsty as well. Make sure there's always a bucket of water available in the training area. Go and visit it often, give your horse a chance to drink, but feeding soaked feed helps with that as well. Handling it's not so nice because obviously it's wet and cold, especially in winter or if you're in a wet area. If you are feeding this, you might want to get a treat bag like this one, which is like just a kind of plasticky one that can be washed, or this one as well also has a plastic insert that comes out of the pocket that can be washed as well, and it just stops it kind of leaking and getting all soggy. Another thing that you can do with this is also feed in buckets. So if you're not wanting to feed by hand, you can just scoop a bit out and throw it into a bucket as a reward as well. I'll often start with horses that way for various reasons. If they're either too grabby or a bit anxious, not used to taking treats from hands, it can be easier just to throw things in buckets. You can absolutely carry on like that too, though it is much simpler as you progress to teach your horse to be quiet and happy about taking treats from your hands, but this is quite a nice one to use for that as well. Okay, so number 4, so we're going up here in value, so this is getting a little bit more exciting. This is unmolassed lucerne pellets. I've also used unmolassed grass pellets as well, and you can get low sugar grass pellets or higher sugar depending on when the grass was cut, so you can bear that in mind too when thinking about your horse. So again, this is high fiber, forage based feed. Don't have to worry too much about weight gain. This is the feed that I generally use when I'm training my horses. I love that it's super easy to handle. I can carry a lot of it if I'm going out riding and stuff. It's easy to use, and it's about the right level of motivation for my horses. My horses are, of course, used to the training, used to being worked with food. They're all pretty relaxed around food. But you might find that some horses start to get a little bit too excited by this. So if you find that they're just a little bit too much, that they are kind of grabbing the food, they can't really relax, maybe getting a little bit of ear pinning or something like that, then one of the things that you can try, and there's lots of other points that might be contributing to it, but in terms of the feed, one of the things that you can try is then just going back down the levels to something like chaff or hay, really low value, re-establishing relaxation and build it up. As I said at the beginning, it's quite easy to build motivation with positive reinforcement training. So if I've got a horse who has ended up in a state where they're just a little bit tense about the training, I'll go back down to something low value, make sure they're nice and relaxed there. Even if they're not that engaged, I would rather have that with the relaxation and then rebuild it up, rather than trying to get relaxation with a horse who's just a bit too focused on the food. I love using food rewards in training, obviously, is what I do. But you want to pick the right one so that you've got that balance and it's not all about the food, that they're also still able to kind of think and be calm and relaxed. And as I say, it does vary quite a lot depending on the horse. So this is kind of the middle one that I generally use with my horses. Okay, so number 5, really starting to raise the value level now. So these are conditioned pellets. So any kind of pony nut or pellet that's got any kind of, molasses, grains, anything like that in, might be used for weight gain or for horses in work, anything like that, is generally going to taste a little bit nicer. Now, I do sometimes use these for India. She is not very foody, needs a little bit more motivation sometimes, and this can really help. If you are wanting to increase motivation, increasing the value of the food can really do wonders, as long as your horse doesn't get, as I was saying before, too tense with it. So you can really kind of play around and experiment with the treats that you use. I'll often use these for just specific behaviours, and that can really help too. So it might be, for example, if I've got a horse who's not so forwards, that they're finding that tricky, that they get something lower value for most behaviours, but when we're working on going forwards and building a bit of enthusiasm there, I'll use something a bit higher value. And that can really help to kind of draw attention to it and give your horse a little bit extra reward. So it helps to tip the scales in favour for getting that bit more of that behaviour in future. All right, so nearly there on the highest value ones now. Moving on to number 6. So this is just a mix. Now this is the stuff that you can just buy at any feed store. It's got a mix of kind of grains and nuts and things in it. Anything with grains, very high value, very high sugar, generally not really needed for any horse unless they're in super high work, but can be very, very useful because it's super tasty. So again, like I was just saying, if you want to bring it in for something really challenging, then adding in something like this can be really helpful. If you're doing that, one thing to be aware of, that your horse is you're not creating too much conflict with that. When we bring in high value food, the levels of motivation can go really high, but sometimes the horses can be doing things for the treats because it's just so tasty, even if they're not entirely comfortable with it. And that's something, obviously you can watch their body language and you can adjust for that too, but just be aware because sometimes that can bring in a bit of unwanted conflict. I do use this for my donkeys. So again, if you've got working with anyone that's a bit fussy or doesn't like that much or is underweight and can do with a little bit of extra calories, you can use your higher value rewards in the training. My donkeys, I think, were only fed this before I moved here. So I am trying to wean them onto something a little bit healthier in training, but honestly, they're just not that interested if it's less value. So this brings me on to something else I want to talk about here, is that you absolutely can mix the value rewards to find the perfect level for your horse. So with my donkeys, I mix these two. They get the lucerne nuts and they get the horse mix. And I find that if I mix those about 50-50, I get enough motivation and enthusiasm, they'll eat them. The nuts on their own, they just ignore, they won't eat. These ones, A, it's not very healthy for them, and B, they can just get a little bit too excited. But I find that mixing them works perfectly. So you can really mix the rewards to find the perfect balance for your horse.
So here you can see I'm feeding Coco a mix, but you'll notice that I'm actually giving him just a few nuts at a time. So earlier I said handfuls are the way forward, but if you're working with a mini, a donkey, anyone with a small mouth, teething problems, prone to choke, things like that, just give them a very small amount and make sure they have lots of time to chew in between as well.
And just bear in mind that if you haven't trained for a while, they might be more enthusiastic and you can use a lower value. If you're doing a lot, they're a bit tired, you're working on challenging things, you might want to bring a higher value in, and you can mix and match depending on the energy of the day, what you're working on, all those kind of things. So it's not just pick one and go with it. You've got a lot of options here to play with and to vary for your horse. And last but not least, the highest value. So apples, carrots, specifically branded horse treats, anything minty. Polar mints is very popular in the UK as horse treats, anything like that. Generally very, very high value, so get horses very excited. I generally don't use them as my main treats, partly for that reason. They can be a bit too excited, they're often full of sugar. They can also be very expensive, so everything else that I've covered, you buy in 15 or 20 kilo bags at the feed store. So when you're doing a lot of training, it's high forage, low price, pretty good to use if you're using quite a lot. I've got 7 equines here as well, so I want to keep those costs down, and they're generally pretty healthy. Treats like this, so fruits, horse treats, mints, I'll not use as my main training treat. Maybe if they've got you working with an equine that won't eat anything else, we might start using with some of these, but generally they can be a bit too exciting. So I'll just use little bits occasionally. Maybe, for example, when they get in the horse box, they'll get a little bit, or when I first mount, they'll get something really special. So just again, to draw attention, a little treat like that. Now, one thing to bear in mind with all of these is that it's going to be your horse's personal preferences. So with fruit, for example, Freckles loves melon, gets very, very excited about it, but none of the others will touch it. So you can play around, and you have to find out your horse's own individual preferences as well as you're figuring out what's high value and what's low value for your horse. Okay, so I hope that's given you a lot of ideas of different rewards that you can use and helped you try and decide which ones that you might try with your horse and how they might help. In connection training, we're always looking to have high levels of relaxation and high levels of motivation. And when you get both together, everything is just wonderful. And picking the right reward can be, for a lot of horses, a really important key piece as you try and help them find that balance. I love using rewards in training. It really brings a lot of joy to both the training, the behaviors, but also to the relationship with your horse. And it really, really strengthens learning. So finding the right reward so that you're able to use it successfully is really important. So I hope that that's helped, and really go and experiment and see how your horse reacts to different things. And yeah, happy horse training.
Thanks for watching. I hope you found that helpful. If you want more, then please check out the Connection Training Club, our online membership site. We have tons of home study courses full of hundreds of step-by-step videos, and this one, of course, is part of the Connection Training Foundation. It's all about getting started. Now, it's pretty in-depth when you switch over to positive reinforcement training, so we've got tons of information here, particularly about how to get started successfully, whether your horse is foody, not foody, over-enthusiastic, disinterested, anxious, all of the rest of it. And a lot of the pieces that I've just been talking about the food is things that we talk about as your training behaviors, setting up sessions, all of the different elements that you can do to get that lovely emotional balance and build that connection. From there's also tons and tons of other information. You can get support, study groups, we have monthly events, you can talk to us live, we have guest lecturers in. It's all there's loads and loads going on. You get tons of support, and of course you get to join hundreds of wonderful members from around the world. To join the club, just head over to connectiontraining.com. You'll find more information about myself, Hannah, Rachel, who's my mum and my colleague, what we do. And if you want to sign up to the CT Club, we would love to see you there. Just click on Learn CT Online, the CT Club, and you will find all of the information, everything that's in there, and links to sign up as well. You can also head over to Amazon, just search for Connection Training, and you'll find our book there as well with more information in. So thank you very, very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.